All right. With that, I would like to introduce Mayan Johnson, our Housing Department Manager at SCAG. She'll be kicking us off today.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. Good afternoon, everyone. On the behalf of the SCAG Housing Department, I'd like to welcome you to our Regional Utilities Supporting Housing, RUSH, Capital Projects Application Workshop. You're probably all here today to learn more about the application and the process for submitting a utilities infrastructure related project for grant funding from SCAG. So for today's agenda, we'll be giving a program overview, and then we'll be also going over the timeline for the program. At that point, I'll turn it over to my colleague Jessica on instructions on how to apply, the application review process, and also additional announcements, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So a little bit about SCAG's Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program. So it started in 2019. The state, they recognized the importance of the role of regional planning in helping our local jurisdictions meet their housing need. And so REAP 1.0 provided $47 million to SCAG to do planning related activities to increase and accelerate housing production. So the program was so successful that the state the state started REAP 2.0 program. This provided $246 million, excuse me. The state provided $246 million to SCAG for its regional formula share to also accelerate housing production, but also to do meet other objectives as well. So these include accelerating infill development that facilitates housing supply, choice, and affordability, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and reducing vehicle miles traveled. So this is a way to implement our Connect SoCal plan. So together, the requirement of these programs are to be transformative planning and implementation activities. And of course, this is urgent because REAP 2.0 program requirements require that these funds be encumbered by June 2024 and completely expended by June 2026. So this is a critical program, but it is also urgent. So we're looking to fund activities that are ready to be implemented. So there are three main areas that SCAG has divided the REAP 2.0 program into, and today we're going to be focusing on the bottom one, programs to accelerate transformative housing, or PATH, specifically the third one on that chart, which is the RUSH pilot program. So one of the crucial definitions in the REAP 2.0 program is the definition of infill, because the projects do have to be considered infill for the purpose of the REAP 2 program. So for REAP 2, the state has provided guidance that means that these areas are where all of the following apply. The area has to consist of unused or unutilized lands and are within existing development patterns, and that is or will be accessible to destinations and daily services by transit, walking, or bicycling. Additionally, the project has to be located in either an urban center, urban corridor, or area with transit supportive densities, or an established community that meets all of the following. It consists of, or previously consisted of, qualified urban uses. The area is predominantly surrounded, approximately 75% of the perimeter, by parcels that are developed or previously developed with qualified urban uses. Perimeters that are bordering navigable bodies of water and improved parks cannot be included, and no parcel within or adjoining the areas classified as agricultural or natural and working lands. So this does, just looking at this or glancing at this does look pretty restrictive, but in fact, we do acknowledge that there are variances of what could qualify infill across our region. So in case you are considering applying for this but aren't quite sure what if your project qualifies for infill, Jessica will go into the technical assistance, our one-on-one office hours that can help guide you through this definition. But we do want to highlight that there is still some flexibility within this definition. So if you have any doubt, feel free to reach out to us, and we can help guide you through and talk you through your project. So our PATH program funding, there are three main areas, and these together total about almost $89 million. So the first two, NOFA and HIP. NOFA is about $45 million. It's funding for innovative housing finance and trust funds and catalyst funds, while the HIP pilot program, housing infill on public and private land, is scaling up development of available land and large corridor-wide or area-wide infill housing policies and initiatives. So that's about 8.9 million. These first two, the calls have already closed for those, and SCAG staff is evaluating the applications and also reviewing them for approval by a regional council. The one we're focusing on today is, of course, the regional utility supporting housing. So this is $35 million for non-transportation utilities infrastructure improvements. So this could be things such as dry utilities, such as electricity, or it could be also water, it could be sewer, stormwater. It could be any of those except for gas, because that is a requirement from the state for REAP 2.0 funding. So there are a lot of utilities infrastructures planning, and today we're focusing on capital projects that could potentially qualify for the RUSH pilot program. So for RUSH program eligibility, the eligible applicants are mostly public agencies and tribal governments. So there are SCAG counties or cities within our region, of course, tribal governments within the SCAG region, and also public agencies that have a specific role in housing production within the SCAG region. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a city or county, but they do have to have a strong role in the production of housing. So our program is intended to fund investments in utility infrastructure planning and capital improvements that support housing production goals, increase capacity for a sizable number of housing units, and address housing affordability, and embed resilience and adaptation, such as green infrastructure that can support system utility capacity and reduce overall housing production cost. So we are looking for applications that can that meet these qualifications in order to be eligible for the program. So there are two main RUSH project categories. This morning we talked about at a workshop similar to this, but it focused on the infrastructure planning. So we allocated $5 million to this bucket, and the maximum awards will be between 800,000 and 1 million. But again, it's allocated at a total of 5 million out of the 35 million. So these are plans, programs, and green infrastructure plans that support increased utility capacity in areas designated for residential development in housing elements. And it also needs an implementation component, so some kind of adoption or commitment by the governing body in order to implement these infrastructure plans. But this workshop this afternoon is for capital projects. So out of the 35 million, 30 million has been allocated towards this bucket. So these are projects that address current and future utility restrictions in housing development through upgrading infrastructure for sewer, water, stormwater, and dry utility systems, and enable continued infill. The maximum award for projects under capital is 10 million, but again, the total allocated is 30 million. So our program timeline for RUSH, we opened the application on September 7th, and we'll be holding one-on-one office hours at the request of any potential applicant until our application deadline of November 6th. So it's due at 11:59 p.m. on November 6th. So shortly after, we'll begin the evaluation of applications submitted, and then also we'll start issuing conditional award letters. We anticipate the regional council will approve the funding, consider and approve the funding recommendations in early 2024, and then we'll be able to initiate the memorandum of understanding, the MOUs, to supplement the project or as required for the projects. So we definitely want to encumber these funds by early 2024 to ensure that we meet the REAP 2.0 guidelines from the state, and we require that all projects must be completed by December 31st, 2025. This also includes all invoices submitted by that date as well. So we are looking for projects in order to be eligible that they do need to be completed by that point. So with that, I'd like to turn over to my colleague, Jessica Reyes Juarez, to provide you directions and give an overview on how to apply.
Great. Thank you, Mayan. Yes, nice to meet you all. I'm Jessica Reyes Suarez. I'm an associate regional planner here at SCAG, and I am supporting this program. So before we get into the application itself, I just wanted to make sure everybody had an opportunity to download the application or know where to find it. So if you want to follow along, we're going to be at scag.ca.gov/REAP 2021. And you'll note that there are two different applications, one for the infrastructure planning and then one for the capital. So for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to be reviewing the capital. So yes, you go to scag.ca.gov/REAP 2021. And then you'll scroll down and see the programs to accelerate transformative housing path. You'll click that. And then that should land you to the Regional Utility Supporting Housing main landing page. As Mayan mentioned, this is one of the programs under PATH. And if you scroll down, the first box you'll see is technical assistance. This is where you can register for or schedule our office hours. This is one-on-one time with our staff to review your project idea or review any questions you may have on the application. And we'd like to reiterate that there's no limit to the number of meetings you can schedule, so please use this as a resource. And after this, we'll also be posting the webinar recording and this PowerPoint to this area as well. And our contact information is also listed here. And if you select the next box, that how to apply, you'll note again that we have a different application for planning projects than we do for capital projects. So you want to make sure you download the right application. So you would go under the capital projects and download that Word document and that Excel budget template. And this also provides information on how to submit your application. It's very straightforward. You'll just be emailing it to us. And then we also provide some resources. So we have the updated PATH program guidelines. Please be sure to review this as well. And this is the updated version. So please make sure you're looking at the updated version of that. And then we also have an infill guidance document to really walk you through how to identify if your site is meeting infill, like Mayan mentioned, and we identify some more terms and what we mean by some of those terms in that document. And we'll also have a link here to the REAP 2.0 mapping indicator tool. This is what you'll be using to submit some of your maps that we'll go over later on in the presentation. And then next week, we'll be posting some instructions on how to use that tool and instructions on, not instructions, but a guidance document if you need any help developing a letter of support. So great, that brings us to the RUSH application. So before we start digging into the contents, we're just going to go over the submittal checklist first. And I just like to point out again that this is a Word document. It's form fillable in a sense that you'll just be prompted to fill the right questions and tabs. So you don't really need to do any editing. You don't need to take it outside of Word. You can just keep it in this Word document. So with the submittal checklist, this is really here to help guide applicants in making sure that they've completed all of the materials of their application. And you'll note that the application is broken into 4 different sections. We'll go over this in the presentation. And you'll also be checking here to make sure that you've submitted your budget timeline, deliverables attachment, your project area maps, and your letter of support. So moving on to the first section of the application, which is the terms and signatures. This is really just to note that there is a duly authorized person on behalf of the entity that can sign and that's authorized to sign and certify this application. So that could be a city manager, a public works director, planning director, or equivalent. And here they're just confirming that all the sections are completed and verifying that the information is complete and that it's adhering to the PATH program guidelines. And we'll also note that there's a commitment here that you'll provide a resolution that you can execute an MOU and receive the funds. You don't need to provide that resolution as part of the application, but if your application is successful, we will need to have this resolution in order for you to receive the funds. And moving on to section 2, minimum requirements. So this is just confirming again that you are an eligible applicant. Mayan mentioned who the eligible applicants are. They're listed here as reference as well. So those are SCAG cities or counties, tribal governments, or public agencies with a role of housing production within the SCAG region. And you're verifying again that the project is in an infill area and that it aligns with the REAP 2.0 eligible activities. And for the capital projects, we're also asking for you to confirm who the implementing agency is. So if you're the lead applicant, if you're not the implementing agency, please identify who that would be. Is it a utility district, utility provider, or developer? And then we'll ask you to also verify that you and the implementing agency have the experience to do this work, to take on this capital infrastructure work. And you also, again, be asked to verify how your project meets the REAP 2.0 infill definition. And then as part of section 3, this is more of the project background. We'll ask for your information, who is going to be our lead contact throughout the grant process. If your agency plans on submitting more than one application, we ask that you prioritize them here. And again, we'd like to point out that it is very likely, we do anticipate this program is going to be oversubscribed, so we'll have more funding requests than funding available. So we just ask that you be strategic and think about that. And you'll also be asked here to just list the name of your project, what's the service area of the project, provide any site description or boundary area description to help us understand what area this is going to be serving, and also the estimated cost of the projects and how much you're requesting out of the RUSH grant. And under section 3 as well, we have the project description. So please describe how the funds will be used to expand utility capacity to serve housing needs and advance resilience. Describe the budget, timeline, scope, deliverables, delivery basics, and project status. So really, this is just a shorter project description. I think we asked like 250 words, but that's flexible. But it's really just to give the evaluators an understanding of what it is that you're trying to achieve, what are the dollars tangibly going for, and verifying again how you can be meeting this the timeline of completing the project by December 31st, 2025. And then you'll also be asked to identify what priority Connect SoCal priority growth areas are in your project area. And you can use the tool. We'll go over that later on in the attachments, but we have a tool to help you identify what that is. And again, we'll emphasize that you don't necessarily have to be in a priority growth area to be eligible for funding. It's just a way to demonstrate how there's regional impact here in your project. Great. Now moving on to section 4 of the application, which covers the scoring and the evaluation. The application questions will follow this evaluation criteria. So I just like to point out here on the first criteria, that leads to transformative, significant, and beneficial impact. You'll notice that this has about 45% of the weight of the total scoring. And that's because this criteria is really just coming from the state's guidance about those core REAP 2.0 objectives of accelerating infill, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and reducing vehicle miles traveled. And while you're working through the application, you'll note that we do have a scoring, a rubric, a scale that the evaluators will use to score the responses and the questions. So it ranges from 0 to 5, with 0 being disqualified. So if there is a 0 in any of the questions, the whole application will be disqualified. So please be sure to complete them fully. And while you're working through the applications, there's more information on what will constitute a 5, what will constitute a 4, for each of the different criterias. So I'm going to go over quickly what to expect in these questions, and I won't repeat them verbatim, but we just want to highlight, what is it that we're looking for in this while you're working through your narratives. And first and foremost, we'll, just say these are narrative responses. So this is really intended for you to help us understand your project and your community and the needs that you'll be meeting. So for leads to transformative and significant beneficial impact, again, this is about addressing the REAP 2.0 objectives. How is this providing a substantial change in land use patterns, equity, and travel behaviors? And again, Rush is about utilities, but it's also about housing. What is that connection to housing? And how is it accelerating infill, supply choice, and affordability? Again, this is going to be very important to uplift in this part of the questions. So that first question is going to be focused on that infill piece and specifically housing. How is this supporting housing supply choice and affordability? And ultimately, how will these investments accelerate your housing production timeline? So we'd like to know that information as well. And with affirmatively furthering fair housing, please describe how the project combats patterns of discrimination, of segregation, and will foster equitable and inclusive communities. And with VMT, we're looking to see how the project promotes development that reduces vehicle miles traveled and aligns to housing production goals, and also aligns to our sustainable community strategy. The next series of questions are going to be focused on equitable targeted outreach, and we are asking for a commitment to continuing outreach and engagement with the community, especially with disadvantaged and historically underserved communities. So first with the first question is going to focus on your agency's experience. So what is your agency's experience with engaging with residents in disadvantaged and historically underserved communities? And if you have limited experience, describe how this project can help you gain that. And the following question will focus more specifically on the engagement piece. What's your commitment to engagement? How will you work with community organizations, community leaders? How will you work with members of the community to help shape your project and the project outcomes? If you've already done some of this engagement, you can talk about too how your engagement that you've completed in previous efforts helps shape what this project looks like today. And the next series of questions are going to focus on leveraging partnerships, policy match, and the ability to complete the project. So again, the projects must leverage partnerships, prior policies, and otherwise maximize the impact of REAP 2.0. We've mentioned before, this is one-time funding. So we do have this in the criteria to really see how we can really expand the impact of these one-time dollars. So that first question is going to be looking at the commitments. What is your existing or prior local policy environment that supports this project? What's your organization's completed plan, policy, or ordinance, or program that supports the readiness of this project? I'll also highlight that for capital, this criteria is even more important because we, as Mayan mentioned, we do have this timeline of December 31st, 2025. So we really need to see what is in place to show that this project is going to be moving forward, that it's ready to be moving forward. And with the partnerships and financial match, we do ask for you to identify either funding source that you have available or that you're going to be using or that's committed to this work, or partnerships and commitments from other organizations, how this investment is going to help leverage and act as a catalyst for additional investment. So here really it's about, describe what you have in place already in terms of funding. It's not having a financial match is not required, but we understand that for some of this capital work, you may be seeking dollars from Rush for one phase or one component of a larger project as well. So we really want to see the full picture here. And in regards to your ability to complete the work, describe your agency's experience working with these, capital infrastructure projects, and your plan for ensuring that the project is completed on time and on budget, and really help us contextualize the project's costs. So tie back into that workbook, which is going to be the budget timeline scope workbook, to help us understand what the dollar request is going to be going forward. And the next series of questions is going to be about prioritizing disadvantaged communities. So the projects must demonstrate how they support priority populations. And as I mentioned, we do have that REAP 2.0 mapping indicator tool to kind of help you identify which priority populations are in your community. We'll also note that it's not required that you have a priority population in your project area, but we do ask that you are working to meet the needs of those in those populations. So that in one way that could be affordable housing commitments or commitments around affirmatively furthering fair housing in higher resource areas. That's another way to meet that. So again, the priority populations, we ask that you identify which ones are located in your project area, which are priority populations you'll be serving, and accompany this with a map. We'll show how to go, how to submit that map as well. And then describe the benefits. So describe how the proposed projects will benefit these priority populations, how it addresses or repairs historic or current inequities related to housing security, affordability, displacement, and again, expanding access to higher resource communities as well. And for these capital projects, as your entity or your city, if you're making this investment and commitment to utilities for housing, describe any other anticipated community benefits you could see coming from that, whether there are other affordability requirements that you're adding for any developers that come in, or the parks, open space. So help us understand how this investment will help lead to other community benefits or potential. And that brings us to the last grouping of questions here in the evaluation criteria, which is how it contributes to regional transformative change. So really here, it's about how it achieves our regional goals around sustainability, around resilience, our Connect SoCal, housing needs, and really housing needs across our SCAG region. And you can reference, some of those PGA layers when you're thinking about these questions as well to help understand the regional impact. So that first question is going to be focused more on how is this effort, this investment going to help you scale up your housing supply? How is it creating those conditions necessary to scale housing supply choice and affordability locally and also in relation to the Southern California region? And that last question there is going to be on regional impact. So what's the geographic impact of your project? How does it implement some of our sustainable community strategies in reducing greenhouse gases and reducing vehicle miles traveled? And how it can be built in similar contexts across the SCAG region or replicated. This is also important to bring up. How do you feel like this is something that can be replicated in other similar environments in SCAG? And then really focusing again on what's the impact of reducing greenhouse gases and VMT. How does this ultimately support sustainability and resilience beyond the project area? And you'll note we do have this strong emphasis on sustainability and resilience in the application. And we are looking to fund innovative projects that kind of meet these requirements as well. So those questions are the narrative responses as part of the application. Now we'll go over the attachments that are also required. So that first one is an Excel workbook with your budget, your timeline, your scope and deliverables. And then we'll go over the project area maps that are required. And then the letter of support. You only need to submit one letter of support, but you're welcome to submit more. So with that first workbook attachment, there are 3 tabs here. You do need to complete all of these fully. If anything is missing, it could be deemed incomplete. The first tab is the budget and timeline. So again, show what are the tasks, the subtasks, highlight there in the column what the funding request is coming from Rush. And in the other column, highlight other fundings that you already have committed to this effort, any other matching fund. And then in the timeline there, show us that, this project can be feasibly completed and constructed. The elements that this grant is supporting can be completed by December 31st, 2025. That second tab is going to be expanding on the scope and deliverables. So again, following that same task and subtask format, just expand on what the scope, description, and approach is and the anticipated deliverables there. This will help us really understand that this project is moving forward, that there's a lot of thought and understanding of the elements that need to go to complete this work, and going to help make the case that this project has the ability to be fundable. This third tab, which we'll sit on for a little bit, is exclusive to the capital application. So again, make sure you're downloading the right application. And it focuses on the delivery basics. So this is really to help us understand that there's a level of shovel worthiness in your project application, because again, we are thinking about that December 31st, 2025 date of being able to complete this work. So you're asked a series of questions here on what the status is of some of those important elements. And that includes your environmental documents. What is the status, or what's the timeline for it to be complete? Same with the design phase, what has been completed, or the timeline. Same with permitting, what's the status of that, or when that is anticipated to be completed. And with construction, again, what's your estimated start end date for construction? And what's your approach? Is this going to be developer-led? Is it going to be led by Public Works bid, or will the Public Works be the one constructing the project? And then there's also a series of other questions around funding, if this is applicable to you, but identify if there's any gap funding beyond Rush requests that you have, or that this project has. Are there any other obligations or agreements that are impacted by this project? What is the status of site control and the timeline for that as well? Identify any utility ownership information. And again, on the implementing agency, reiterate here who that implementing agency is, if it's you or if it's somebody else. And then any other information that you think will be useful for us to understand the timeline of your project in this funding request. So we do understand that, well, we've gotten this question before, whether all of this needs to be completed to qualify. And it's really to help us understand that this program, that your application can be feasibly completed by December 31st, 2025. So this should help support the level of the completion here, should help support that your project is, feasible and can be completed in time. And some of these elements, it's okay if it's not completed by the time of you submitting the application. Help us understand when that will be done. And it is also permissible to include non-capital elements as part of your application. If some of these need to be finalized, this can be included as part of your capital project application. But again, with the understanding that can that be done, and can the capital work be done by December 31st, 2025? So if you have any questions on that, we can talk about it more in the Q&A, or we can set up one-on-one to really understand the uniqueness of your project. And the next series of attachments are the maps. So the first one is going to be an infill map. We do have an infill guidance document prepared. This is going to walk you through exactly how to create a map. Very simple. You can go on Google, you can create a satellite screenshot, delineate your project area, and really reaffirm why you believe this that your project is meeting the REAP 2.0 infill definition. So separate from that are the priority population maps. And for the priority population maps, you'll use our REAP 2.0 indicator mapping tool. And there is a link to that in our resources tab. And you'll select the layers of the different priority populations, turn those on and off. You take a screenshot of that, and that'll be your submission for this. And same with those priority growth areas. You just turn on and off those layers of the priority growth areas that we identify, and then take a screenshot of that and submit that as part of your maps. And again, we are available for office hours and for technical assistance. You're welcome to schedule as many office hours as you'd like with us. I'll post the direct Calendly link in the chat. And we'll also have this application workshop posted, the webinar posted, as well as the PowerPoint. And that'll all be available on our webpage that we went over. And that wraps up the elements of the application. Before we get into Q&A and discussion, just like to hand it over to Scott Johnson of SCAG, who's just going to make a quick announcement on another pilot initiative we're rolling out under REAP 2.0.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, just wanted to talk briefly and give a little plug for a complementary program that SCAG is also doing from REAP 2.0. It's called the Regional Pilot Initiatives. What the program's idea is, it's more focused on transportation, but in the same vein of, transportation, promoting infill development, and promoting further fair housing and reducing VMT. And so there's basically 6 major areas: big data research, accelerating active transportation, mobility hubs, mobility wallets, and universal basic mobility, TDM, and curb space management. But basically, SCAG is looking to partner and assist cities, jurisdictions, different public entities to do transformative projects in this area. And just want to give a brief plug for it. The one I'm just going to call out and point out that might be of most interest to people on this group are the mobility hubs. So we're looking to work with the city or a public entity to test out the mobility hubs concept and do a pilot project. But I'll leave it there. If you're interested in this, please email me. My email is below right there. Happy to set up a meeting. We can go through each of these 6 areas and which areas you might be most interested in working on. But with that, thank you very much, and I'll pass it back.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, if you Scott's email's right there. You can also, you're free to put that in the chat as well in case anyone would like to contact Scott.
Yeah, I'll put my contact in the chat as you suggest. Thanks.
Great. And so with that, I know that was a lot of material. Some of you may have been on the first workshop we had earlier today around planning. So maybe we answered some of your questions there, or you have some pressing questions specific to this capital project application, but we are here to answer any questions that you have. We have the Q&A function. You're welcome to put your questions there or in the chat. And yeah, we'll give you all a few moments to ask any questions you have. And I'll also introduce Elizabeth Carvajal, who is here as well, and who's going to help support answering some of the questions you have.
As everyone is considering questions, I wanted to just reiterate Jessica's point that we really want to be a resource for all of you as you're contemplating potential projects. This is a lot of information, and want to make sure that as you're evaluating feasibility or interest, that you feel free to please reach out to us to set up one of those technical assistance or one-on-one office hour sessions. There isn't a limit on the number you can have, and so we just want to really stress that we want to support you all to navigate the process, the application, the questions, eligibility, concepts that you're considering or you might be contemplating for this program. So please don't hesitate to take us up on that. We want to make sure that we're supporting you all as much as possible to navigate the program. So please keep that in mind.
I don't see any questions coming in yet. I'm sure somebody has one, but
These questions in the Q&A, Jessica. The first one is, do we
it's not
need
showing up
ARC?
for me. Okay, go
Do
ahead.
we need ArcGIS account to print the maps, or can we use the screenshot function?
Oh, for the maps, yes. So you won't need an ArcGIS account. It's a public webpage, the REAP 2.0 mapping indicator tool. You can open it from your browser, from Chrome, and you can use the tool on that webpage to turn on and off the layers. And you can just take a screenshot of that.
Alicia, I don't see any questions in Q&A, so can you please read them out if there's more? As I don't know if Jessica sees them, but I don't see
Yeah, I
any
don't
on
see
my end.
Okay, I can read the next one. Can preparation of construction plans be included, or is this only for costs associated with physical improvements? So I guess this is planning, right? Can
So yeah,
construction planning.
yeah. I mean, I think if you're preparing, I would love to talk with you about this particular project, maybe in TA, because what I'm trying to think through is it in the planning category or the capital? I guess the capital category is really intended to fund construction activities. So part of what I would wonder is, are you wrapping up design and looking to go out to do some construction within the time frame that we've allocated? Or are you only looking to develop the plans? So if it's just the plans, that may be more appropriate in the planning category of the program, but would love to talk a little bit more with you about the specifics to just confirm that.
All right, next question is it necessary for a city to have an approved housing element in advance to the application deadline?
No, not for REAP, correct? Jessica, let me know if I'm mistaken. I don't believe it's required for REAP funding. Although, sorry, go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, I was just going to say not required, but we do ask about what your policy plans, your policy environment, what's in place, as part of that leveraging. But it's not required.
Yeah, so it's not required to be eligible, although it'll be really important for you to flag everything Jessica noted, and for you to be able to demonstrate how this utility capacity project is going to support implementation of housing and in the housing element, et cetera. And so how that is a consideration to keep in mind, but you don't need to have one to be eligible to apply, but it is an important consideration to demonstrate that connectivity of the infrastructure, capacity expansion that you're looking to do as it relates to helping your jurisdiction implement housing. But again, we can talk more specifically in a TA session if that's helpful.
Next question is there a funding agreement template or example available for the RUSH program?
Not yet. There will be an MOU with successful recipients, but the template is not yet available.
Alrighty. Next question. Can a city apply for grant funding to complete infrastructure improvements for projects that are currently intended to be paid for using bond revenues from CFDs? Grant funding would help reduce the cost of the development and therefore the cost passed on to future homeowners.
I think we would want to understand that a little bit more, because the way I'm understanding the question is that there isn't a funding need, that there's a intent to kind of swap dollars. And so would like to understand that a little bit more, because to some extent there would need to be a case for why that is a compelling need over other potential projects that don't have the funding and are lacking funding. It's because here we're looking at swapping dollars. It doesn't seem that there's a funding need in this scenario versus, say, other projects that do have a gap and really need the money to close the gap. So happy to discuss further. I think that part of what would be critical for such a request would to help tell the story and explain why this is a compelling need that would accelerate housing production, because as described, it seems that there's already you're already kind of doing it. So where is the need for the funding, I think is part of what I am asking and reacting to a bit, but I think it might be helpful to talk it through a little bit more in case I'm missing a nuance or, some of the specifics.
The next question is, I believe it's referring to the infill definition. It's asking about the reference to being accessible to destinations by daily services, by transit, walking, or bicycling. So they would like to know, what is considered accessible by walking or bicycling? Is sidewalk connection or bike lane connection to destinations good enough, or is there a distance limit?
A distance from the destination. So let me kind of break that up a little bit. Accessible by walking, I think would be a sidewalk, right? Or bike lanes. I think that's demonstrating some accessibility. Or access by walking and biking. They're and so I think the key thing is, like, I think there is a level of consideration around how far a destination could be from that access point. And I'm not quite sure right now offhand if we have some specifics on that in our info guidance. So for example, like if somebody's walking to a destination, I think 3 miles might be too far from the destination if you're walking, right? But if it's a bit closer, I think that might be more viable. And so I think perhaps we can follow up on that clarification point. I want to take a look at our guidance to see if we have anything specific on distance. And if not, perhaps we can provide a little bit more guidance on that. But to answer part of your question, when we say the state's definition speaks about access to destinations, walking, biking, or transit. Walking is, sidewalks, biking is having some bike paths. I think it's part of the proximity that is important. So we can look into that a little bit more. And so if whoever asks a question, if you wouldn't mind reaching out, that would be great. So we can make sure we can get back to you. And then we can also kind of put some more information out to the group as well.
Yeah, and I just added a link to the chat with our infill guidance document. Again, you can download this directly from the website as well under our resources. But there are we do identify some of the terms a little bit in more detail there, if you'd like to look at that.
Okay, and the next one says, the city has older sewer lines deteriorating. Would the funds be used as the city plans to increase mixed use in the downtown area? So I guess they're asking, could the funds be used as city plans?
So is the question if the funds could be used to upgrade that sewer and expand it to accommodate the growth of mixed use, or to develop plans to do so? I think either one would be eligible. If it's the plans, I similar to the prior question, I'm thinking that maybe more of a planning application situation. If you're just looking to do the plans to upgrade the sewer to accommodate that growth that you're speaking about, the mixed use of housing. If it's the actual construction, then it would be part of this bucket of things. And again, the key thing would be making sure that the work can be completed by December 31st, 2025. Jessica, anything you want to add, or anything I may have missed?
Yeah, that's right. I think what the question may be getting at too is if it's a mixed use area, not just a housing development, not just a housing site. So yes, it can meet that. Housing is definitely part of it. So that's mixed use areas are eligible as well. And it can be at a plan level, right? Or corridor level, in terms of what the improvements would be going for.
Yeah, and I think specifically, that's a really good point, Jessica, when you're talking about mixed use, that even helps make the case for the VMT reduction as well to some extent. And so definitely something that would be acceptable.
Next question is the RUSH program a use it or lose it program, or will there be other opportunities to apply for RUSH in the future?
It's a one-time funding, right? For now.
It is. And we do have the deadlines that we've described are really coming from the state. And so we have obligations to encumber funds and expend the funds by a certain period of time. And so this is really the opportunity we have. However, we are hopeful that we can demonstrate some great projects, need and projects and successes in the region through this program that hopefully spurs excitement and future funding opportunities. But at this point, this is this is what we have in front of us. So we want to make sure that, again, that we're making this program and supporting folks to apply and have some great projects in our region.
And considering that December 31st, 2025 deadline, can a city apply for a specific portion of a certain component of a larger project so that they can finish within the timeline?
Yes, that is something that would be feasible. It would be critical for us to understand. Let's say that you're looking to apply for segment A of a 3-segment project. Do you have the full funding for the other segments, or what is the timeline for the bigger project to be completed? I think that would be of interest to us, but there is the ability to apply for part of it and complete the other portions with other funding. But we would like to understand, and again, we can get into this in TAs, but a question we would probably have is, do you have the funding in place for the rest of the project, and what is the timing for completing the rest of the work? But it is allowable.
The next question is on the rubric for grading for the partnerships or local matching. So that portion of the rubric is worth 5 points. So they're wondering if there is no partnerships or funding matches, will they just score 0 points, or, does that disqualify them?
If you don't answer the question on how there is partnerships or funding match, then you would get a 0 and it would disqualify you. But you don't have to have a funding match to answer that question. So show how you do have, who you're working with, what partners do you have, and the extent of how much of that you have in place will affect what score you get for that.
And if we can just dig into that, is this, and Jessica, please remind me if I'm completing questions, but this is policy match. Is the policy a different question, or is this like?
Yes, there's policy. That's the first question.
Mm-hmm.
What are your plans, policies, programs in place? Talk about what you've completed. Then the next one is about funding and partnerships that you'll be working with.
And when so the funding could be, so for example, if your jurisdiction is paying staff time, like covering your staff time to work on the project, that could be considered a financial match, right?
Right.
Because, let's say that there's your in-kind, right? Your labor in working on the project, that could be considered a financial match. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have another grant somewhere else. It could be your labor. And then on the partnerships, can we kind of expand on that a little more? For example, we're not necessarily saying like they need to have an agreement with somebody. It could be like, is this a project that has been supported with community stakeholders, or CBOs or the chamber, or are there kind of folks that have been supportive of the project? Can we expand? I want to make sure that we can, and maybe if it's helpful to pull up that specific question. I just want to make sure that folks are clear on what we are asking for related to partnerships, so that they can identify where they have them in place as it relates to the project. And maybe it's the presentation you want to flip to, whatever's most helpful.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask if David can flip to slide. I'm gonna go to it right now. Slide 29. That may be easier than me going back and forth. I think it should be slide 29. Well, while he's doing that, I'll just point that, there it is. Perfect.
Is it the next slide?
Yeah. There. So for capital projects, depending on what your project is coming in at, if we're funding a portion of this, if this is part of a larger phase, which we anticipate a lot of them would be, right? Because this is for the utility work. You could talk about some of those elements in this question as well. If there's been interest from developers, there's a lot of flexibility here on how you can kind of show that there is leverage here in terms of your partners or organizations that you may be working with. If you're working with like an implementing agency as well, a utility provider, we're just trying to get a sense that there is that this has some teeth and it's moving forward. And that's going to be a very unique question for every applicant, because it's really going to depend on the elements of their project and who they're working with.
All right, this next question I'm going to read verbatim. Do the capital projects need to be a required condition of approval by the city planning department to complete a housing project?
Can you repeat that?
Do they have to be a required condition of approval to complete a housing project?
Yeah, so in regards to the capital projects, does the city planning department have to have some type of condition of approval in order for the project to be selected, it seems like?
No, although the question is prompting me. So no, we're looking for projects that will expand utility infrastructure to support housing production. I just there's some language in this. I just want to make sure that there's language in the state guidelines about funding projects or like mitigations and things like that. So I think for this question, I would love to talk a little bit more with the person that asked the question. As I understand the question, the answer is no, but I want to make sure that they're not asking about a project that's like a mitigation or a requirement as part of like an environmental document or something. And so want to understand a little bit more, but to answer the question, no, a project doesn't have to be required as part of a condition of approval for a housing project.
Next question, is there a prevailing wage requirement for the labor associated with the construction work?
So all projects this is state funding, and so they will be required to follow all requirements that come with state dollars. We can confirm the specifics on prevailing wage, but note that this is state funding, and all requirements that come with utilizing those dollars for construction are required to be met and be complied with.
And so the next question is, for a capital project application, can they include planning and implementation, and if their project can meet the December 2025 deadline? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes. And Jessica, please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe our capital project application allows for folks to apply for capital and planning, right? Great. So yes, you would want to apply with the capital application and not submit a capital and a planning. You would want to submit them together in the capital application as one project. That would be allowable so long as you can complete by December 31st, 2025. Is there anything on that, Jessica, you would want to add, any nuance? But I believe that's how we set it up. Please, let me know.
Yeah, no, that's it. So it's you would want to highlight that, like what elements in that delivery basic workbook that we went over, what are the elements that you're looking to have funded as well, and then just show that and highlight that in your budget timeline, that both of those can be completed in the timeline, the December 31st.
That is all the questions we have received thus far in the Q&A function.
Great. I'd like to also point out that I added a link here to our Calendly a webpage where you can set up office hours. That's just a direct link to that. You can also find that link on the webpage that we went over, and that this presentation and the webinar recording will be posted on our main path webpage as well, likely next week, but it'll be posted there.
One more question. Is there a conservation corps requirement in the project specification labor force?
No, I don't believe that that's a requirement in the REAP 2.0 guidelines. We can do another scan to confirm, but I think the question's coming from like ATP. That's typical there. I don't believe that is a requirement here. We can double check that, but I don't believe there is.
No other questions at this time. Any last and final questions?
Yeah, I can just reiterate, if you're interested in, or you definitely intend to submit an application, we would encourage you to at least set up one office hour time with us. It would be great to talk to you to get a sense of what your project is and to answer any more specific questions that you have. As you're completing the application, you can either, set up office hours, or you can shoot us an email and we'll work on responding to your questions. Yeah, just like to reiterate that we're here as a resource for you all. Any more questions, Alicia, that have come through?
No more questions.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining, and we appreciate you taking the time to learn about this program, and we look forward to speaking with you more about your projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David, if you can hear me, we can end the meeting.
Sorry, you said something, Alicia?
Yeah, I said we can end it in the meeting.
Oh, we want to end it right now?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.